All right. Before we get into the scripting, I know I was really excited about that, but we actually have one last thing that we need to prepare for so that we can actually implement this thing. Because the whole premise of our automation is that, well, we need to know when the camera is connected, i.e., when the USB cable is connected. And with Q-SYS, because Q-SYS has such a deep hardware integration with things, we actually can know when that is the case. In fact, if you come over here to our USB input component, right, our USB speakerphone, if we double click on it, it opens up and it shows you that there's a lot of things that Q-SYS knows just from the hardware level of things about what's going on between the core and the computer on that USB connection. One of the things is, well, you can see what the microphone level is doing and whether it's muted, and you can adjust its level. But also notice that there's a little light here, a little light that tells us the status is connected. Here's what that means. When you plug in the cable on both ends, the computers begin a handshake over USB. And when that handshake is complete and everything is good to go, this little light turns on saying that the core and the laptop are connected over USB and everything happened okay and they're communicating and data is passing. When that light goes on, that's the data we need to know to be able to appropriately provide either of those two pages. Basically, we're going to tie the true and the false, right? The true layer and the false layer to the Boolean state of this control. If this control is on, i.e. its Boolean state is true, then that means, hey man, give us the controls. If this light is off, meaning the Boolean is false, then give us Gandalf.
Give us Gandalf.
Or give us Shakespeare, I guess.
I will say on that connected LED, a lot of people get that wrong. They think that that connected LED means that the conferencing application that they're running is currently connected to a far-end caller. That is not what that means. It only means that there's a cable between Q-SYS and the PC. It does not mean that it's being used yet.
Right. It just means the hardware is working, which is what we can hope for here. So, great. How do we get that information out of this component? There's several ways, and we're going to do it probably the easiest, most straightforward way. At this particular juncture, we are going to select the component, and we're going to notice over on the right side of the screen under Properties is the control pins, and there she is, the connected pin. Turn that thing on, and notice we have now exposed the connected pin. And that means we're able to use that data in our system. So from here, we need to build a signal chain that takes the data from that pin into our script. But we're also, Nate, remember, we're going to have to go through the emulator.
Which you wouldn't have to do in the real world. In the real world, you could go directly.
Right, correct. We are going to have to complete our signal chain through the emulator because, well, we want our magical toy to work. So, step one is come down to the emulator and zoom in so you can see really good. And you'll notice, boy howdy, there are a lot of pins on this emulator. And I'll tell you now, we will not use all of them in this particular version of the class because, well, we're going to learn some other skills that will allow us to get information without having to use pins. But because we wanted to use this file for all three versions of the class, you'll see that there are pins for all of them. So we're going to use a pin for this first exercise, and it's labeled 01, USB connected to the emulator. I'm going to Control-C. I'm going to select it. I'm going to hit Control-C. I'm going to zoom back out using my scroll wheel, and I'm going to scroll back up and over to my pin here, and I'm going to paste that in. Now, the next question is, all right, I need to take this output flag, and I got to put it somewhere. True, we do. We do need to put it somewhere. Now, in Nate's version of the class, it was kind of easy. He had a script that he was making all of his controls in, and it lived right up here. Well, we don't have one of those, do we? Except for we kind of do. If you come to User Control Interfaces and you come to Class UCI, you will see that there is a component called UCI Controller. And if we drag it out and deploy it, hey, this looks really similar to what we need. Basically, what you see here is a list of all of the controls that we have added to our UCI by adding from the toolbox. These are all of those toolbox controls that we've added to our UCI so far. Unfortunately, none of the controls that we have added are the controls we need. You know what that means? It simply means we need to add another control. Because once we add this control, then we can complete the signal chain and we'll be good to go. So one last thing to do over here on the UCI. And in fact, I'm going to be very careful at this particular moment to make sure that the active layer is the base layer, right? I did that by clicking on the base layer. I'm visually confirming by, yes, the little blue indicator is lit for the base layer. I'm going to go to the toolbox and I'm going to grab an indicator down here, an indicator, and I'm going to drop him on my UCI, and I'm going to apply a class. The class is going to be LED OK, and that's so tiny. I'm going to make him a little bigger, 32 by 32. That's too big. 24 by 24. That's happier for me. And then I'm going to situate this guy right on the top corner of my cameras button. And that's actually going to give me two things. One, it's going to give me a little visual indicator as to whether the cable is connected or not. Secondly, because it is an indicator, it's going to be able to receive that Boolean state that's coming in off of the signal chain. So I kind of like it. It's a nice little touch. It gives a little visual indicator to your user of what's going on with their system. It's unobtrusive, and it gives us what we need. Now, one last thing that we should do is we should give it a name. Control 1, not great. I'm going to call it pin USB. Now, some of you may be asking, why did you do an indicator instead of like a toggle? Because we're talking about Boolean states. Toggles have Boolean states. Momentaries have Boolean states. Why not use one of those? The answer is, I only ever need this thing to be a pin. I only ever need it to receive information. I don't need it to be a control that I can manipulate. So for simplicity's sake, I'm making it an indicator. Now, when I come back out to the schematic page, you can see that it updated, the list of controls updated, and now I have that pin USB control that I need. I'm going to grab right there and paste right there, and that completes my signal chain. You may remember, right? Start up at the USB, and you can follow the signal chain from the USB to the emulator, from the emulator into the UCI script. That's the complete signal chain. And again, like we said, in the real world, you would just do USB to UCI and you wouldn't go through an emulator, because why would you, right? It's pretend. All right, cool. Now we are actually ready to write some script.